Hi, everyone. Welcome to week number 3 for our class. First off, I want to thank you all for your patience while I was in Ghana this week. I had planned to have internet access, and I was staying at relatively good hotels that advertised that they would have internet access, but it was spotty at best. So, sorry for the multiple communications and announcements in one week and the difficulties in posting a video or even some notes and finding some resources for you all. I really appreciate your patience. I was planning actually to be in Ghana for 1 week, and then also with my son, and then to meet my other part of my family in Paris. But we had to cut the trip short by 1 week, and my son and I just came home because my daughter and my wife both got COVID in France. And so, if we were to go to France and stay with them for the week, we would probably, in the cycle of kind of quarantining and isolating, we would have to stay there an extra 3 to 5 days. So, we just decided to come back to the States. So, unfortunately, we weren't able to get to Paris, but it also helps me to connect with you all, to be back here and to have some reliable internet access, especially for an asynchronous online course. I'm sorry about that. I planned for to have internet access this week, so I apologize for the confusion. Um, I want to do a couple things in this video. First is how to have a successful week number 3. The second thing that I want to talk about is the Weapons of the Spirit film and moral norms that I saw in that film. And then those are the two main things for this time together. So, how to have a successful week. You're starting to read Interfaith Just Peacemaking. You just finished up Lisa Cahill's book, Blessed Are the Peacemakers, or at least the sections that I wanted you to read on just war theory, pacifism, and nonviolence, and her articulation of peace building. And now you're going to begin to read Interfaith Just Peacemaking. So this will be Jewish scholars, Christian scholars, and Muslim scholars talking about the 10 practices of peacemaking and how they might fit into their understanding of their scriptures, or if they fit into their understanding of the scriptures. Remember, as I said at the beginning of the class, that the 10 practices of peacemaking initially started as 6 or 7 practices anchored in the Sermon on the Mount. And then as Glenn Stassen built on that, he saw a few other practices that contributed to peacemaking. And then so it kind of developed into 10 practices. And then they began to do an ecumenical study for different denominations of Christianity and how these practices fit into those denominations. And now they're trying, in this book that you're reading, they're expanding that to see if the Abrahamic religions have this in common as well. So you can judge for yourself to see if they do or do not. But that's the book that we're reading, or you'll begin to read this week. And both of these books will contribute to your midterm essay, which I will talk about more next week, but you will see that there's an essay prompt at the end of week number 3. So that's what you're going to be reading. There's no discussion this week, so you have a week off from that. There's no quiz this week, and you're just kind of moving through that book in the next 2 weeks. Okay, so that's how to have a successful week, is just to begin to read that. If you haven't quite finished the peace building reading, you can you can do that over the next couple weeks as well. Okay, so that's how to have a successful week number 3. What I want to say about the movie Weapons of the Spirit is I show this film because it's an inspirational story of a community that was primarily made up of Christians, different denominational Christians, but Christians in general, and how they contributed to saving the Jewish community in their village from the Nazi pogrom. And so it's an inspirational video that the director, Pierre Sauvage, went back. He was born into that village, and he went back to ask them why they did that. which is a really important question given that the majority of Christians in Europe did not do something like what that village did, and they stood out for what they did. And so it's an inspirational story, but I also wanted to say that it has some Christian ethics built into it, because one of the things that we look at in Christian ethics is we see a community, we see a person do something that connects or corresponds to the kingdom of God. And we look at that and the ethic and the consequences of their actions, and we say, that looks like an authentic Christian ethic. And so we look at the villagers and we say, well, how did this come about? And to identify the moral norms. So, and all 6 of them that are in this film. So immediately when Henri and Emma Héritier talk about, and Pierre asks them questions about why they did it, they're like, that's a silly question, right? This is what you're supposed to do. And that was the dominant theme throughout the film, was that's just a stupid question. We didn't plan it. We didn't advertise it. We just did it. And that's the right thing to do. And that's an example of the particular immediate judgment. You know, you're making a moral judgment. You're not accessing reasons for it. You may or may not have reasons for it, but it just seems like the right thing to do for you. But that as the film unfolds, you will see that they do have reasons for it, and they do have other moral norms that are contributing to their particular immediate judgment. They have rules. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? The great commandment. That's a rule. They have principles of nonviolent resistance. So they did not fight the Nazis, but they also did not cooperate with the Nazis. In the last scene of the film, there's a basic conviction conversation. That is, a basic conviction is something anchored in the nature of God or human nature. And the woman at the end who's being quoted says something like that. There's a question of whether humanity is fundamentally good with the possibility of doing evil, or fundamentally bad with the possibility of doing good. She's asking questions about human nature there. And so that's talking about basic convictions. There are paradigms. The main one was the Good Samaritan, right? But there's also a paradigm of stories that are told throughout the centuries of the Huguenots who were persecuted by the Catholics in France. And so these stories get passed down and down over the generations, and they shape how people see other people. And then the last one, there are symbols. And so, you know, the quote of the Old Testaments in there, that there are symbols in there. And then the pastors, Andre Trocme and Edward Thies, become symbols for the community. And you can see that as the other people in the community talk about them. And so, yeah, you can see them all in there. I'll point you to a passage in the Bible where all of these moral norms take place. And that's Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. This is the do not worry passage. And in that passage, when Jesus talks about not worrying, he uses all these different ways to motivate people to not worry. And so it's an interesting way to talk about this. And it's important to recognize what kind of conversation we're having, especially in peacemaking, when we're having some kind of conflict. Is it a conversation about basic convictions? Is it a conversation about a rule or a principle? Is it just an immediate judgment, and you have to go back and you have to look at where did that immediate judgment come from? The question that I want you to ask after the film, not only which some of you shared in your post, not only is what would have I done if I were in that same situation, but also how was this community formed in such a way that they made this decision? And as we translate that into our own personal ministry context, wherever you're at, how do we morally form the people that we have the opportunity to lead, whether it's in a lay capacity or in an official church position capacity or organizational capacity? How do we form people morally, so they make these kinds of judgment that stand the test of time, and are in rhythm with the kingdom of God. A couple of other small observations that I want to say in the movie that struck me the first couple of times that I watched it. The first one is I love when they talked about being a minority of two, the two pastors, that they stood against the Nazis, and then but non-violently, and then they also did not cooperate with them. So they were holding out their non-violent resistance beliefs, and they just were steady and consistent with those over time. And I like that they were a minority of two. I also like the conspiracy of goodness, especially in Nazi-dominated Europe when evil was reigning. And so this community, while they didn't conspire together, I like the language that it brought together of kind of ironic language, the conspiracy of goodness. And then the last thing that I want to say for all of you that are training to be in some kind of official ministry capacity, there are no small callings. These two pastors were in the metropolitan areas of France, and they got excommunicated because of their pacifist beliefs to, quote unquote, in the film, the small backwater parish in Les Chambon. But we're still reading about their story today. So there's no small callings. It's just being faithful to what God has given to us on this day and in this era, to be faithful to what Jesus has called us to. And that's good enough for him. Oftentimes when we're in ministry, we look at the grass being greener on the other side. That something needs to be bigger or better. And what we need to be focused on is just being faithful in what God has given to us and enjoying the opportunity to serve him and the people that we get to serve. So that's a little bit of the film, why I have you all watch it. I have become friends with Pierre and have really appreciated him allowing us to watch the film. Again, do not pass this film along to anybody else. I have special permission from him to watch it for this discussion, basically, and to show it to my classes. But it's not even available on DVD or a streaming or anything like that, because it's still in a beta version, being remastered digitally. So he graciously allows me to do this. One thing that he did say in a group that I was moderating, and he came in, we watched the film, he came in to talk about the film and what inspired him and motivated him to do this documentary. And then I said, if you have a word for the evangelical community, what would you say? And he said, without much thought, he said, it doesn't matter what you believe, and it doesn't matter what you say. It matters what you do. And he's talking about, because he has another documentary about the Christians in Europe that didn't, that participated or were ambivalent in the Nazi pogrom. And so I thought that was a really important thing that he said at the end of our time together. Okay, I think that's enough for right now. You can begin with your Interfaith Just Peacemaking reading. I hope you have a great week this week. I posted a couple articles in week number 4 to give you a little more substance for your midterm essay. One by David Gushee, and one a chapter from Ethics for a Brave New World on just war theory and pacifism. That will fill in some of the details, some texture to what Lisa Cahill has argued in Blessed Are the Peacemakers. Okay, have a great week.